Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, July 20th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. At this hour, the Prison Parole Board is convening at the Masyau prison to once again review convicted rapist and former President Moshe Katzav's request for early release. This after a new expert's evaluation submitted by the Prisoner Rehabilitation Authority stated that Katzav can undergo a rehabilitation program outside of jail. Katzav has served over two-thirds of his 7-year sentence for rape and other sex offenses. In April, the parole board rejected his request to shorten the sentence by a third on the grounds that the former president never expressed remorse for his crimes. Katzav appealed that decision and demanded a second hearing. Prior to the start of today's session, Katzav's defense team expressed cautious optimism that the parole board will go ahead and approve the early release after taking into consideration the new expert's opinion by the Rehabilitation Committee. Today's round of deliberations began before noon, and it is possible a decision will be made by the panel to announce its ruling at a later date. If approved, Katzav can be a free man within days. A bill spearheaded by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that will allow 90 of the 120 Knesset members to remove a fellow lawmaker from office was approved after midnight in the Knesset. The controversial law that was the subject of a lengthy, heated debate was approved by 62 Knesset members, with 47 voting against. MKs will now be able to expel a fellow lawmaker for inciting to violence or racism or expressing support for an armed conflict against the Jewish state. The bill was originally known as the Suspension Bill and proposed after 3 Arab MKs paid a condolence visit to families of Palestinian terrorists killed while perpetrating attacks against Israelis. The final version of the bill requires 70 Knesset members, of which 10 must be from the opposition, to file a complaint with the Knesset Speaker against any lawmaker perceived inciting against Israel.
I see this as really a dangerous law. I think this is an anti-democratic law. It gives MKs on their right wing a platform to continue their incitement against mainly Arab members of the Knesset. I don't think that the Knesset should have such an authority to impeach or to expel MKs from the same parliament. I think that such an authority should be kept only for the courts to do that, and I'm really afraid that this law will add now more to the bad atmosphere of incitement and of political targeting of Arab MKs and of generally the Arab community in Israel.
Shots were fired at an IDF post near Metula on the northern border this morning with Lebanon this morning. No one was injured in the gunfire. The Army told IBA News that shrapnel ricocheted off the dog tag of a soldier deployed there, and a second bullet penetrated the military post. The soldier was checked by medics and did not require medical treatment. The Army said the source of the gunfire remains unclear, and it is unable to determine whether the gunfire was deliberate or stray. In a separate incident, Al Jazeera reported an Israeli plane targeted a Syrian army position in the Kunatra area of the Golan Heights today. Initial reports said 1 person was killed and 3 Syrian soldiers injured in the incident. However, Hezbollah's El Manar satellite station claimed the position was attacked by Syrian rebel forces. 1 year after a deadly arson attack on a Palestinian home in Douma claimed 3 lives, including an 18-month-old baby, another home belonging to the same Dawabsha family in the same village was reportedly set ablaze with firebombs overnight. According to Palestinian media, the homeowner, Mohammed Dawabshe, was lightly injured from smoke inhalation after his house was hit by 2 Molotov cocktails. The circumstances of last night's attack remain unclear. Palestinians are accusing Jewish settlers, while Israel police says its initial investigation suggests the incident was criminal in the context of intra-clan rivalries and not a nationalist attack, as believed of last July's attack, for which a Jewish suspect has been charged. The Army is investigating claims that a 12-year-old Palestinian boy was fatally shot by Israeli security forces during clashes in Al Ram in East Jerusalem yesterday evening. The IDF and Border Police denied using live fire in the area, saying it is possible the boy was shot during a dispute between rival families. According to police, violence erupted when border police returning the body of a Palestinian terrorist were pelted with rocks, bottles, and firebombs. Palestinian officials said the boy, Mohia al-Tabaki, was shot in the chest and died shortly after being transferred to a hospital in Ramallah. The Defense Ministry has approved plans for the construction of an additional section of a security fence on the border with Jordan in the southern Golan Heights, this to prevent infiltration by jihadists and other hostile elements amid the ongoing instability in the region. The new smart fence will be a few kilometers long, costing 27 million shekels. It will serve as an extension to another portion of the fence completed along the Golan Heights border in 2013. In January, work also began on a separate portion of the border fence with Jordan in the south, in the Arava Desert. When completed, it will be 30 kilometers long. Simultaneously, Jordan is building its own electronic security fence on its northern and eastern borders with Iraq, funded by the U.S., to insulate itself from the disintegration of Iraq and Syria. Marking the second anniversary of Operation Protective Edge, the Hamas military wing has opened up one of its tunnels to the Palestinian public in the Gaza Strip, offering Palestinian children organized tours inside. At the entrance to the tunnel, located on the eastern side of Sajaya in northern Gaza, the terror organization exhibited weapons its operatives used against IDF forces during the Israeli offensive in Gaza in 2014. It is the first time the terror organization has allowed members of the public inside one of its tunnels. Moving to the U.S., where now it's official. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has formally secured his party's 2016 nomination for the White House. After beating 16 competing candidates, warring with the Republican establishment, and sparking numerous controversies throughout his 13-month-long campaign, Trump easily crossed the 1,237 delegate threshold on the second night of the Republican Party convention in Cleveland, Ohio. His official confirmation was in little doubt after a last-minute procedural rebellion was quickly subdued on Monday. Trump's home state of New York called the formal victory as his children stood with their state delegates on the convention floor, declaring the win. The proud candidate is slated to address the party convention tomorrow night, but in the meantime, thanked his supporters via a special satellite video.
Today has been a very, very special day. Watching my children put me over the top earlier. The party seal, I mean, what we did getting the party's nomination, I'll never forget it. It's something I will never, ever forget. A little over 1 year ago, I announced my candidacy for president, and with your vote today, this stage of the presidential process has come to a close. Together, we've achieved historic results with the largest vote total in the history of the Republican Party. This is a movement, but we have to go all the way.
Canada yesterday announced the appointment of Deborah Lyons, its ambassador to Afghanistan, as its next envoy to Israel. Outgoing Ambassador Vivian Berkovich, who wrapped up her tour of duty last month, spoke to IBA's Eilon Eslin-Levy about Canada's relations with the Jewish state.
Vivian, Canada under Stephen Harper was remembered as one of Israel's strongest friends. Justin Trudeau promised Prime Minister Netanyahu a change in tone. What do you think he meant by that?
I think that we'll see in the future. I'm not sure he promised. He stated there would be a change in tone. And so far, Canada under Prime Minister Trudeau has been very supportive of Israel.
We remember that under Harper, Canada took the lead in combating discrimination against Israel at the UN. It boycotted Durban 2 and 3, even before Israel did so. Are we likely to see a continuation of those levels of support?
Based on the comments made by the Prime Minister thus far, I would have every reason to expect that.
Back to Harper. During his time, the Canadians not only did not move their embassy to Jerusalem, but if I understand correctly, they started planning a new embassy in Tel Aviv. Why is this?
The reasons for having an embassy in Tel Aviv at this juncture for Canada really are very focused on business issues. And that was what we were looking at in terms of location, in terms of quality of space, expanding the trade-related relationship and having a very excellent, proper business office in Tel Aviv. And for business development, you have to be in Tel Aviv.
But moving the embassy to Jerusalem would send a very strong statement of support for Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem.
I think that there might be a case for having a consular presence in Jerusalem. But I think that in terms of pragmatic operations for Canada, Tel Aviv is a good spot.
Justin Trudeau surprised many allies by declaring that Canada was not at war with ISIS, and he withdrew fighter jets as well from the aerial bombardment of ISIS. What can we understand from this about Canadian foreign policy?
That it's changed under Prime Minister Trudeau from what it was under Prime Minister Harper.
In what ways?
The obvious clear that he feels there are important ways in which Canada can contribute, more consistent in his view with what stand or represent Canadian values, and the way in which Canada may have participated in global affairs in decades past, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Earlier this year, there was shock when students at McGill voted to support a boycott against Israel. Is the Canadian public increasingly turning on the Jewish state?
I think that there is a phenomenon in universities. Whether or not the public is turning is something I think that is happening in real time, and we're all trying to sort of nail the jello to the wall. But I do think that we see, not just in Canada, I think we see in the United States, I think clearly we see in Western Europe, there is a trend towards accepting the vilification of Israel and, to a large degree, of Jews.
In diplomatic circles, there can be a tendency to toe the line in treating Israel as the problematic party. Now, as Ambassador of Canada, you were recognized as a very strongly pro-Israel figure. What prompted you to swim against the tide?
Well, firstly, I think that there was a different metric that was applied to me for reasons that I'm still trying to figure out. Strongly pro-Israel, I was often called controversial and outspoken. I reflected, under Prime Minister Harper, the view of the government. I reflected, under Prime Minister Trudeau, the view of the government. So any views ascribed or attributed to me were those of the government. The fact that I was able to articulate them in a perhaps clear and strong manner was then taken to be outspoken or to reflect, for some reason, my personal views.
There were reports at the time that you ended your tenure that the reason the Prime Minister chose to replace you was because you were too pro-Israel. Is there truth to that?
I don't comment on leaked reports to the media.
A previous unreleased annex to the agreement signed between Iran and the West to curb Tehran's nuclear program reveals the Islamic Republic will be able to resume nuclear production in a decade. That's before the end of the 15-year accord. Details of the document given to the Associated Press by an anonymous diplomat show that when restrictions are lifted, Iran will only require 6 months to build a bomb, unlike previous estimates of a year. The diplomat said the new details were an add-on agreement to the existing deal and were approved by the P5+1 countries and the Islamic Republic. According to the diplomat, as of January 2027, Iran can start replacing centrifuges with thousands of advanced machines, enabling it to enrich uranium at twice its current rate. As part of the deal, which was officially signed last July, economic sanctions were lifted in exchange for Tehran's commitment to curb its nuclear program. Kenyan-born Israeli Lona Chemtai is busy training for the upcoming Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, where she will represent the Jewish state in the marathon event. IBA's Zach Marcus has that story.
Kenyan-born Israeli Lona Chemtai is training to represent the Jewish state in the marathon event in the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. The 27-year-old was granted Israeli citizenship through marrying her coach, Dan Salpeter, getting full approval just days before the deadline to participate. Although she is running the marathon event, she is fairly new to the distance, running only short distances until recently starting marathons about 19 months ago, just after the couple's son Roy was born. With a personal best of 2 hours and 40 minutes, she falls far behind the best runners and the Israeli record of 2 hours and 16 minutes. But Salpeter says her best is yet to come.
It really depends the weather, the day of the marathon, because it really changes every day in Rio. It can be a very cool day, perfect for marathon, 18 degrees at the start, and then it can be 25 degrees like we start today, and the humidity is very high. It's very hard to run PB in those conditions, but we have to be prepared for every situation.
Running in Israel in the summer has created tough conditions, Chemtai said, adding she would rather be training back in Kenya, where conditions are much more suitable.
I prefer training in Kenya, but I have to follow what the coach says. In training in Kenya, you have a lot of partners, so you can train in group. Then it was high altitude, not like here.
She hopes in the future to concentrate on track events, but says she will continue to run in major long-distance events. For IBA News, I'm Zachary Marcus.
In local money matters, shares were up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange while the shekel put in a mixed performance. Here are the numbers. Turning to the weather, an IBA's weather team says there will be a slight rise in temperatures. Here are the highs and lows at home and abroad. And that's all for this newscast. Please join us again tomorrow, same time, same channel, when Ari O'Sullivan will be at this desk. I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.